Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 176 of Rush Roundtable. This is an episode where we will be discussing what we think are the 5 best closing tracks on Rush records. So we've each chosen 5 of what we think are the best, and we're just going to go around the roundtable and we're each going to give our 5. But first, you probably have noticed at the beginning, our new branding. We're going in order. If you've watched from the very beginning of Rush Roundtable, we've kind of progressed our branding from the debut album all the way up to Grace Under Pressure. So we're going Grace Under Pressure theme right now for a few episodes. I say few, it'll probably be 15 or 20, but and then we'll continue on. So hope that you caught that and you enjoy that. But without further ado, Ryder, you're going to be the first. So tell us what you think makes a good closing track, and your 5 favorite closing or what you think are the best ones, or however you want to interpret it.
All right. So with my list, I picked out songs that, obviously display, a great level of virtuosity from the band. I think that's important for really a lot of Rush tracks. That's a very big part that I listen for, but also a song that can both wrap up the album like thematically, but also musically. Sound like the best of that album. So my picks, kind of lean towards, songs that rank a little higher in the Rush discography, maybe. That might just be the nature of the songs that I picked, but these are all songs that I think display the band brilliantly, and wrap up the album both thematically, musically, put the best of the album on display. So with my number 5, I have La Villa Strangiato from Hemispheres. You can't talk Rush virtuosity without bringing up La Villa. This is, one of their best tracks, skill wise. I think it does a great job wrapping up a lot of the musical themes of Hemispheres. There's no lyrics, but honestly, that doesn't really matter to me. I think it's just a great, solid closer for the album. Next up at number 4, we have Natural Science from Permanent Waves. I think that this song sonically really highlights where Rush was at in their career. They started moving towards a little bit more of a, not necessarily commercial, but, they were pulling back the song lengths a little bit. But this song still shows that, Rush is still a very, talented progressive rock band, but it still has, the certain sound qualities that the rest of the album has. And I think it's just a great way to wrap up Permanent Wave, still show that this band is still a prog rock band at the end of the day. Number 3, I have Cygnus X1 Book 1 The Voyage from A Farewell to Kings. You don't get really much cooler of a closing track than this, for at least what it stands for in the Rush discography. This song is one of the few Rush songs that directly leads into another one, the starting track of Hemispheres. Musically, it puts the best of the sort of proggy sound up front. We have a bunch of great parts that move in back and forth, a bunch of really unique soundscapes towards the middle, and just incredible playing from all of the guys. Number 2, I have Working Man from the debut album. This one might be a little weird where I have it ranked, but I think Working Man at the end of the debut album did a really great job of, encouraging listeners to listen through the rest of the album. Things might be a little different today with the landscape of streaming services, but for sure on vinyl, it's kind of, you can still jump in between, but it really encouraged Working Man, the song that everybody knew off this debut album. It being the last one, I feel indirectly caused a lot of people to listen through the rest of the album. So I think, putting your big hit song towards the end of the record, I think that was a great move from them. And also, I think it's just the strongest song off the debut album. Definitely puts all 3 of the guys on full display. Great solos from Alex. There's not a whole lot more that could be said. It's the song that blew up the band. And then number 1, I'm sure one that you guys are going to have a lot on your lists, is The Garden from Clockwork Angels. You don't need me to tell you how beautiful this song is. I think it has some of the best integration of the string section that was present on Clockwork Angels. It weaves in so well with the music, and it really pushes what the guys are doing forward. Incredible singing from Geddy, amazing guitar playing from Alex, and some great drumming and an amazing lyric for Neil. I'm glad that not only this was the song that closed out Rush's most cinematic album, but it was the one that would end up closing their career. And that's why I think The Garden is my favorite. So yeah, those are my top 5. Ryan, what about you?
Well, first of all, nice job on time. So I lectured these guys on time prior to this episode. So yeah. So funny enough, well, actually, I will say first what I think makes a good closing track, and I echo a lot of what Ryder said. Thematically, musically, needs to wrap up that album. Um, Ryder, you mentioned some songs that were the best in the discography. I'm actually taking a different route. I'm not doing that. These are not some of the best in the discography. And for my third one, you'll really understand why I said that. But my number five is actually your number five, La Villa Strangiato. Now, it's not, now, this is probably considered the best song of the five that I'm going to choose, um, honestly. But it's, I think it definitely, obviously, it doesn't really wrap up the album lyrically because there's no lyrics, but musically, I think Hemispheres to me is all about. It's kind of their show off album. It's kind of like, yeah, we are freaking awesome album, right? Um, both lyrically but musically as well, obviously. And um, La Villa Strangiato is no exception. It's complete, just the whole band showing off what they can do musically, and I think it's the perfect track to kind of segue into the next album with Permanent Waves, and it puts a nice stamp on the end of Hemispheres. Um, my number four is Presto's closing track, Available Light. Now, we just spoke on that, and I wasn't on it, but in episode 175, um, I think this one, thematically, the theme of perception and all that, um, it's a wonderful closer to this record. To me, Presto is um, I don't want to say a cool down record, but it's kind of a softer record. It's not like this, heavy rocking record like you get with, some of the late 70s stuff and coming around again in the early 90s. It's kind of in between. Um it's mellow. It's a mellow record to me, and this is the perfect track to wrap it up. Number three. So this is where you're probably all going to laugh at me, but it's Hold Your Fire's High Water. Now, why do I think High Water is a phenomenal closing track? Well, this album thematically is all about instinct and time. And I think water is, I mean, we talked about this in I think I hosted the Taishan High Water Roundtable months back. But I talked about it there. You can go watch it if you want all my opinions on it. But I really think that, water as humans is, you know, honestly, it's like one of the most important things that we, put in our bodies and that we, yeah, and yeah, right, yeah. Um, and I just think that instinctively we all kind of just gravitate to water in so many ways. And um, there's a lyric, "The water takes me home," and what does that really mean? What is, someone says, all right, take us home. Well, it means wrap it up. Well, okay, it's the last song on the record, right? So I think that was intentionally put there, and I think there will be a lot of people who think I'm a fool for saying this, especially listening to this at number three. Um, but I think you have to put it in context of the record and not the context of the catalog. This is better than Natural Science. This is better than Working Man. It's a lot of few songs that Ryder mentioned in terms of where it fits on the album, in my opinion. There's not a better song. I'm not saying that, so I want to make sure I'm clear. But I really think it's a perfect closer for Hold Your Fire. Um, Number two is from Grace Under Pressure, and it's Between the Wheels. But Grace Under Pressure to me thematically, it's very dark, Cold War vibes, all that. Um, but it's also it's it's a record that Rush, um, I believe they produced themselves, right? I think they were supposed to have Steve Lillywhite, and then they produced it themselves or co-produced it, whatever. But it's a very different direction from where Signals was going. It sounds more like Moving Pictures to me, but it's a very dark record. Um, and Between the Wheels is it's a dark song, and musically, it's a very creative. Grace Under Pressure is a very creative record, and I think Between the Wheels is a very creative song musically. Alex's solo always does it for me, and I really think this song puts a bow on this record perfectly. I think it's a phenomenal closing track. I don't think any other song on that record could have fit as a closer. Um, and finally, same thing as Ride of the Garden, number one. I mean, I when we did the openers, what we thought were the best openers, my number one was Caravan. And I think, how do you not put Caravan as the best opener and the Garden as the best opener when you have a record that, goes hand in hand with a book and walks through every section, basically every chapter of the book, and is a song to a degree. And thematically, it's literally has to go there. I mean, forget forget the sappiness and all that goes along with the song. Where the hell else is it going to go? It doesn't fit anywhere else. So of course it's the perfect closer for this record. It's a perfect closer to this story, and then, like Ryder said, it's the perfect closer to Rush's career. So I think for all those reasons, The Garden is number one. And honorable mention, Grace to Grace, Geddy Lee's solo album. I could have cheated and put that in my list, but I think that's a phenomenal closer as well. So Alex, what do you got?
Basically, pretty much some of what you and Ryder were saying. I mean, I was back and forth as far as 4 and 5 go. I was thinking, of course, Livia Strangiato, of course, Natural Science, but I actually wound up for number 5 going with Everyday Glory. Counterparts is one of my favorite albums, and there's just it's Rush. It sounds like Rush. It's and as in regards to closing out an album and why it's a good closer. Some of the lyrics are a little, I don't know, not really. I don't want to say negative, but some of the lyrics they're painting a picture but the music is uplifting. It leaves that album with this sense for me, this sense of forward momentum, this sense of we're going somewhere, we're doing something, we're gonna triumph. It has that, and I guess the name, just Everyday Glory. It just sells itself as something that we listen to this album, we're moving forward, like it just said. And I'm trying to keep it quick here because Ryan lectured us on time. Number 4, I did say Available Light. Yeah, obviously we spent 45 minutes talking about it last week, and
A little bit of recency bias, right?
yes, well, maybe I was sitting there with Donna, so everyone can watch, and what was everything we said last week, just go watch it. That's what I say now. Between the Wheels, the same as what Ryan said. Between the Wheels is number 3 for me. For that whole aspect of the Grace Under Pressure, the intensity of it, the darkness of it, the Cold War of it, the synth, the way it begins and the way the song just closes out and ends. As I've said on various roundtables, that so many people like to take issue with songs that fade out. But I mean, in some of these cases, you think, oh, some of these songs are kind of fade out songs. It stays in your head. You're at the end of the album, whether you're listening to records or tapes back in the day, CD. It keeps that record, it keeps that song playing in your head, and it's just a psychological benefit. Same as Vital Signs for me, number 2. I love Moving Pictures. That was the first album I heard. It's kind of obvious to cite Moving Pictures, but Vital Signs, it was, to me, I guess it was almost like if Spock wrote a pop song. The idea that you have this really wild keyboard intro, you have this killer bass line coming in, you have a bass solo in a short song. This isn't a show-off song, look how awesome we are, other than just being awesome in general with the lyrics and overall playing. But we're not having a guitar solo 3/4 of the way through. We have a bass solo, and it fits perfectly. Of course it does. So just that alone says, what an excellent song to end Moving Pictures. And yes, I'm The Garden, for everything that the Rye guys already said. It ended the career. It's just every lyric in there, you just stop and think that, like Donna was saying too, Neil knew that he was coming to the end of his career one way or another, for one reason or another, and he probably had that in mind. He had to have had that in mind, that this is going to be a good ending song for our catalog. So that's just me.
Yeah, wonderful choices. Everyday Glory almost made my list. I kind of snubbed it. Todd, what do you got?
Okay, well, being a big prog rock fan, I tend to like to say that songs that have a big finish are the kinds of songs that I really like for to end an album, to have like a really epic finish. But I also like songs that shift the feel to something kind of very different from what's come before it, and to something kind of relaxing and life affirming and but then again, sometimes you get really lucky and the closing track leads you to where they're going next. And I have one that really kind of does that for me. But so number 5, I'm going to go Mystic Rhythms. I like the relaxed feel of that song. It's exotic sounding, and he's talking about things, he's talking about mystic rhythms, and what you're hearing is kind of a mysterious rhythm. It's good use of electronic drums at a time when a lot of people were using them. That's probably the best use of electronic drums, one of the best that I've ever heard. A lot of cool guitar effects, a lot of repeated patterns. They're really cool, and I think the song is really well balanced. It you hear Geddy do something, and then you hear Neil do something, and then you hear Alex do something, and then you hear Geddy do something, and it's kind of like nobody's dominating it. Everybody's giving equal amounts of interesting things. So that's my number 5. Number 4, I also picked Available Light, and when I started, I knew that Available Light, that was the only one I knew was going to be on the list before I started really getting into choosing these. I like that the arrangement is sparse. I like the piano, and the piano is really kind of up front and in your face, which is unusual for a Rush song. I like the way, I mean, people talk a lot about on Presto, the drum sounding thin, but Neil's really hitting them hard. For a kind of a slow atmospheric song like this, he's really hitting the drums hard. There's a lot of really cool fills in it, and drum fills in it, and I think that Available Light is Geddy's peak as a vocalist. I think that's the best he ever sounded. He was nailing those high notes, and that was probably, he was getting better and better and better, and then he would start to age. And so I think where we see Geddy in Available Light is his absolute peak as a vocalist. Number 3 is Sing the Sex One, Book One, The Voyage. It's dark, it's epic, it's scary. I looked up, there are so many really cool rhythmic things happening in it that are really unusual, and it kind of reminded me of the term math rock. And I looked that up, and it basically math rock, the actual math rock is like compared to Rush and King Crimson. I suppose King Crimson would have come first, but it's a very early math rock song, I think. One of the coolest things about Sing Us That's One, Book One is that when it came out, you were like, oh, that's book 1. Maybe there's going to be a book 2. And there was, but it was cool to think about that back then, to think, if this is the beginning of something, and something's going to come after it that succeeds it. And Geddy's vocal at the end is just epic and crazy and intense. And I remember being a 15-year-old and going, whoa, what was that? What is that I'm hearing? So yeah, I think I almost made it number 1, but I made it number 3. My number 2 is Between the Wheels. I think that it has some wicked Alex solos. The great thing about it is that there's a big Alex solo in the middle, but there's also these little pieces of Alex solos kind of throughout it, which is very cool. I think it's some of his best playing. That's my favorite Alex Lifeson solo, the big solo in that. And I think the synth chord progression in the chorus is really beautiful, but at the same time, it's going to a dark place. I mean, you hear that chord progression, and then it goes into another war, another wasteland, and another lost generation. And you're thinking, that's the last thing he says. And you're thinking, oh, that's kind of dark for something that has some really pretty parts in it. And that's what I like, it is the juxtaposition of those two things. My number 1 is Vital Signs. And I just think that the song just has such a great feel. And when you think about some of the things they were influenced by back then, I mean, some people mentioned the Police and some kind of new wave kinds of sounds. That song is a little sparser and a little, leaner than some of their other songs, but it's very timely. And I mean, those things that they're influenced by really pretty much just happened. So it was cool when you're a young person like I was when that came out. I was in high school and I heard Vital Signs. and I could tell that they were influenced by some of the same music I was listening to. I thought that that was really cool. And I kind of feel like Vital Signs kind of gives you a signal of what's to come, because it kind of sounds like some of the stuff on Signals. And I think that that's really cool. And I think the last minute 30 from the bass solo on is just magical. It's just very beautiful. And it's just, I happen to like fade outs, and I think that's a great fade out. And so that's my number one. I had to cut the Garden in La Villa Strangiato, and I was not happy about it.
Well, I was just about to say, I'm taking notes over here, and I wrote down Vital Signs, and I wrote clean sweep with a sad face because you ruined the clean sweep of the Garden
Oh,
being number one. But one thing I want to add,
it
Todd,
figures.
you you said with Mystic Rhythms, you said balance. It was one word that stuck with me, and I said a long time ago, and when we talked about what we thought were the most balanced albums, and I thought Power Windows was the most balanced album, like
I do
all
too.
killer, no filler type of thing, right? And it's not just because I love Power Windows. I just think I think all the songs are good. None of them like overshadow the rest of the songs, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't think of how balanced Mystic Rhythm sounded either, and I think that's a phenomenal pick. So a good one here for sure.
Thanks.
And we the last three of us all had Available Light at number 4. So that's kind of interesting too. All right. Matthew, welcome back. What'd you say, episode 79 you were on? So a couple years ago. So welcome back. Go ahead. You're up.
Hi there. Yeah. So I'll keep mine sweet and short, and it took time for me to like see what endings fit to my top 5. So I was thinking of what actually blends with the title on the ending. So I'll keep it short. So my number 5 is Available Light as well. Uh, I'll mention the lyric of just to make it a little more specific. On the wind and in the Available Light, I'll go with the wind. So it's like grabbing opportunities in life. So as you said, the album was mellow. The ending was good. So Available Light would be my top number 5. Number 4 would be Everyday Glory as well. So rising above the ashes of Everyday Glory, we have to rise up every day and have love. So that's what I think about Everyday Glory. It's about getting up all the time and seeing every day, right, until we pass out. So that's a good ending for Counterparts. And then my number 3 is Countdown. Nobody mentioned that one, so Countdown would be my number 3. My favorite part about it is the countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If they said that, yeah, it's like a rocket launching. It's kind of like me having to get up in the morning saying 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I gotta get up. You know, it's kind of like it's like a progress. It takes progress to have a goal with this song. So that's what I see about the countdown. It was a good ending. Yeah, it's a countdown, you know. So my number 2 would be Out of the Cradle. Nobody mentioned that one as well. Here we come, Out of the Cradle, endlessly rocking. So I'm somebody who's been struggling with OCD. It's about facing your fear and growing in life. Also growing in life and getting out there. So Vapor Trails is a heavy album, and I believe that facing your fear to get out of the cradle is a good ending for that album, right? My number 1 is going to be The Garden. It tops everything. It's the end. So in the fulfillment of time, garden to nurture and protect, it's a measure of life. We have love and we're alive. So we're alive, and this is the end. This is like the lyrics are very deep. So good job to Geddy Lee, and that's going to be my number 1. Honorable mentions. It's in between High Water and Grace to Grace. So it was a tough one, but The Garden wins this one, guys, and I appreciate your time.
Good stuff, man. Out of the Cradle. That's a very deep
That's deep. Man.
cut.
That's
Yeah,
a good pick too.
but it is a good pick, and I love the fact that you mentioned Endlessly Rocking, because I think that's a double meaning. The Cradle, but like Rush. Rush is quite literally endlessly rocking, and to put that at the end of the album, it's kind of like we're back, after the hiatus, and yeah, no, great pick. All right, Egor, you're up. Nope, no sound. All right, Egor was having some technical difficulties, so we're gonna wrap up this episode with a probably pretty poor edited cut to him, where he's just gonna have the stage to talk through his five, and yeah.
Hey everyone, let me tell you what I consider a great closing track. There are some good last tracks on the albums, like Natural Science, and it's just a good track for me. But the closing track reflects the main aspects of the whole album, and it leaves you emotionally drained after listening to the album in a good way, like you just saw an epic, perfectly written movie. So, my first choice is Mystic Rhythms. I think that Power Windows is a perfect album. And even though I'm not a fan of Big Money, but I gotta listen to it for the album to be experienced as a huge, very carefully crafted work of art. And also to appreciate Mystic Rhythms even more, because to me the album goes from bright and epic mood to the dark and anxious in some way. There are some traces of darkness in Manhattan Project on side 1, and on side 2 there are traces of relaxed mood in Territories in the verses. And so when the Mystic Rhythms begins with those eerie drums and pads and steady synth, it feels like we reached the darkest possible place on a seemingly fun album. Also, I consider the lyrics to be the most abstract on the album. So after 7 tracks that are describing something specific, it feels nice to have some rest from it. My second choice is Working Man. The debut album is a bit polarizing amongst the fan base, but I think as an album it works just great. There are no bad moments, some are just weaker than the others. And it's a great debut album from the 70s, so Working Man takes every aspect of that kind of album and turns it to 11. The rawness, the groove, the instrumental section, and most importantly the ending. It really feels like you just witnessed a 70s band live concert and they are ending it with this groovy, epic track that ends with the main riff being played slower, like you're waiting for this grand finale, like all the rock and roll bands finish their concerts with. But it's a studio album, and that's what makes it a great closing track. It really serves a purpose of giving us that 70s hard rock vibe. My third choice is Countdown. The fun thing about it is that the album comes full circle, Signals. And somehow I noticed it only last year. Subdivision starts with dun 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 on the F sharp, and this one is da 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 on E, which is lower, which means darker. After the synth solo, it sounds to me like one more Subdivisions reference to the chorus of Subdivisions about schoolyards. Not just because of chords, but because of the picking pattern. And as we heard many times in different tracks by different bands, the radio transmission voice never adds any fun mood. It always something paranoid. The whole album has a very futuristic and anti-utopic feel to it. I feel like this song wouldn't have that much impact if it didn't come right after losing it, which is very personal and emotional. My next choice is We Hold On from Snakes and Arrows. I feel like the title explains it perfectly. They didn't know that they will create Clockwork Angels. The arrangement and vibe are very similar to the whole album, to the whole Snakes and Arrows album, which is not even my favorite album. But if I listen to it in its entirety, I just gotta listen to We Hold On. It has a bit of everything from this album, like Armor and Sword elements, Far Cry, Hope. Also hearing the constant repetition of How Many Times line gives some kind of introspective and calm feeling after listening to such an intense and rich sounding album. And my final choice is The Garden from Clockwork Angels. Well, what can I say? It's the last Rush song and it's perfect. I think it's one of the best Rush songs ever. It's very subtle in some ways. The chords, the backing vocals, the constant transitions from minor to major in the bridge and in the solo are changing the mood all the time. And when the songs have that kind of uncertain feeling, it just feels like life in general. In some situations I would rather feel melancholic all the time, rather than going from good to bad again and again and again. So this track does a great job of summarizing all the emotional roller coaster that was an hour before that, and in the whole catalog, and the whole 40 something years of career.